Part 1, The Mask of Virtue.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
What if the greatest burden you carry is not your past, not your pain, but your relentless desire to be good? Not good in the sense of living with integrity or truth, but good in the way others expect you to be. Good in the way society paints with pastel colors, agreeable, polite, selfless, unproblematic. From the moment we're born, this idea is spoon-fed to us through stories, classrooms, and silent expectations. But what if this goodness, this constant performance of virtue, is slowly killing off the parts of you that are most alive? You've been conditioned to believe that being good is the path to love and belonging. You were praised when you shared your toys, when you kept quiet in class, when you didn't cry too loud or laugh too hard. Over time, the reward system taught you that pleasing others is safer than expressing your truth. You learned to trade your authenticity for approval, to shape your behavior into whatever made others most comfortable. And now you wear the costume of goodness so well, you've forgotten it's a costume. Arthur Schopenhauer, the German philosopher of dark truths, saw this clearly. He argued that at the core of human existence is not rationality or morality, but what he called will, a blind, insatiable force that drives all living beings. This will is not noble or evil. It simply wants, it hungers, it pushes, it never stops. According to Schopenhauer, our suffering begins the moment we try to resist or deny this force. And trying to be perpetually good, in a world where our very nature is driven by irrational will, is like trying to hold back a tidal wave with a paper umbrella. When we try to be good all the time, we create a split within ourselves. One side is the curated version we show to the world. The other is the raw, messy, emotional self we hide away. That hidden part doesn't disappear, it festers. It builds pressure, and eventually it leaks out in anxiety, resentment, or quiet despair. How many times have you smiled while feeling broken? How many times have you said yes when every cell in your body screamed no? The cost of goodness is authenticity, and authenticity is the root of vitality. When we constantly perform the role of the good person, we disconnect from what's real. We live in fear of being disliked, judged, or misunderstood. We water ourselves down for the sake of harmony, unaware that the harmony we protect is often built on self-betrayal. And in this process, we lose our voice. We lose our edge. We lose the fire that makes us human. Schopenhauer didn't believe in the idealized version of human morality. He believed that much of what we call altruism is rooted in masked self-interest. Even our acts of charity, kindness, or sacrifice often carry an unconscious desire for recognition, safety, or control. This doesn't make us evil, it makes us real. But when we pretend our goodness is pure, we lie to ourselves. And that lie creates dissonance, inner conflict, and emotional fatigue. Let's bring this into modern psychology. There's a term called toxic niceness, a psychological pattern where people suppress their boundaries, emotions, or needs in order to be perceived as likable and good. It sounds harmless, but it's deeply damaging. People pleasers often suffer in silence, bottling up their truth until it turns into stress, physical illness, or quiet rebellion. They struggle to say no, to express anger, or to ask for what they need. And all the while they wear a smile that hides the storm inside. Ask yourself this: who do you become when you stop trying to be good? Not reckless, not cruel, but real. What truths would you speak? What would change in your relationships, your work, your life? The answers might scare you, but they also hold your freedom. Schopenhauer once wrote, "Compassion is the basis of morality." But he didn't mean the soft, performative compassion that seeks applause. He meant the raw, difficult compassion that arises when we confront suffering, our own and others, without illusion. Real compassion doesn't require you to be perfect. It requires you to be present, and presence only happens when we stop performing. The pressure to be perpetually good often becomes a form of spiritual exhaustion. We strive to be kind even when we're depleted. We try to forgive even when our wounds are still bleeding. We give and give until our soul becomes a hollow shell. And then we wonder why we feel numb, disconnected, or resentful. This is the hidden cost. Goodness without boundaries becomes self-erasure. It becomes a slow suicide of the spirit. Most of us are haunted by the fear of being seen as selfish. But selfishness, in its true form, is not evil, it's survival. It's knowing when to protect your energy, when to say enough, when to walk away from what drains you. Schopenhauer understood the power of retreat. He believed that solitude, silence, and inward reflection were not signs of weakness, but forms of rebellion against a world obsessed with appearances. Maybe being good all the time isn't noble, it's just conformity in disguise. Here's the question only you can answer. What would it cost you to stop trying to be good and start trying to be whole? Because wholeness includes darkness. It includes anger, desire, and complexity. It includes saying no. It includes being misunderstood. But it also includes peace, the peace that comes from no longer needing to be anyone but yourself. So the next time you feel the urge to be good, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this from love or from fear? Is this action rooted in truth or in performance? And if you find that your goodness is a mask, maybe it's time to take it off. Not to harm others, but to finally stop harming yourself. Part 2, the morality trap. There is a deep and subtle tragedy in our lives that very few of us ever notice. It is the silent suffering caused not by doing wrong, but by constantly trying to do what is right according to someone else's definition. We strive to be good partners, good parents, good citizens, good friends. Yet rarely do we stop to ask, good by whose standards? Good for whom? In this unexamined pursuit of virtue, we often lose ourselves. And what is more tragic than a life filled with approval, but empty of authenticity? Schopenhauer, with his characteristically unflinching gaze, saw morality not as a ladder to enlightenment, but as a mirror that often reflects our hidden motives. He believed that much of what we call morality is actually fear wrapped in noble clothing. Fear of punishment, fear of rejection, fear of being seen for who we really are. And so we cling to moral systems like armor, hoping they will protect us from the chaos within and around us. But as long as we are driven by fear, even our goodness becomes a form of control. Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to always try to be the better person? To swallow your anger, to apologize first, to mediate every conflict, to sacrifice your needs for the sake of peace. That exhaustion is not a spiritual trial, it's a red flag. It is your psyche telling you that your version of good may actually be a form of self-abandonment. And when you abandon yourself long enough, you begin to feel invisible, not just to others, but to yourself. There's a reason why so many people who try to be good all the time eventually break down. They develop anxiety, depression, resentment, or even rage. These symptoms aren't signs of failure, they're signs of suppression. Every time you silence your truth to preserve an image of virtue, you create an inner split. One side becomes the socially acceptable self, the mask. The other becomes the shadow, everything real and raw that you've pushed away. And over time, that shadow grows stronger, more desperate, more dangerous. Carl Jung, the great psychologist of the soul, once said, "I'd rather be whole than good." That statement echoes like a thunderclap across the landscape of our conditioning. To be whole means to integrate all parts of ourselves, even the ones we were taught to hide. Our anger, our desire, our sadness, our limits. To be whole means we stop pretending, we stop performing, and we finally come home to ourselves. But this is not easy. The world doesn't reward wholeness, it rewards goodness. Especially the kind of goodness that is predictable, pleasing, and polite. The moment you break the mold, when you speak your truth, when you set a boundary, when you say no, without apology, you risk being labeled as selfish, rude, difficult, or even dangerous. But here's the paradox. It is only when we dare to be misunderstood that we begin to taste real freedom. Let's make this real. Imagine you've been the good child your whole life. You followed the rules, got good grades, made everyone proud. But deep down, you're exhausted. You've suppressed your creativity, your sexuality, your spontaneity. You've become a shell of someone else's expectations. Now imagine breaking free. Imagine telling the truth. Imagine risking their disappointment to protect your own soul. That moment of rebellion, terrifying as it may be, is sacred. Schopenhauer believed that life is fundamentally suffering, but not in a nihilistic way. He saw suffering as the natural consequence of desire, of striving, of constantly trying to escape the present moment in pursuit of some ideal. And the pursuit of goodness is one of the most seductive ideals of all. We believe that if we are good enough, we will be loved. If we are good enough, we will be safe. But love and safety built on performance are not real. They are conditional, fragile, and ultimately unsatisfying. So what happens when we stop trying to be good and start trying to be true? We begin to live from the inside out. We begin to feel again. We begin to say what we mean and mean what we say. We begin to trust ourselves, not the voice of authority, not the rules of society, but the quiet wisdom that lives in our bones. This is not anarchy. This is alignment. And alignment is the only kind of goodness that doesn't cost your soul. But to reach that place, you must confront your inner judge. That voice that tells you you're only worthy when you're giving, sacrificing, pleasing. That voice is not your conscience, it's your conditioning. It was installed by parents, teachers, religions, and systems that benefit when you obey without question. And every time you believe it, you shrink. You compromise. You disappear a little more. What would it look like to stop listening to that voice? Would you rest more? Say no more. Leave a job or relationship that no longer honors you? Would you create something wild and beautiful, even if no one understood it? Would you speak a truth you've buried for years? These are not small questions. These are the questions that define the shape of your soul. We must also explore the idea of guilt. Guilt is often the leash that pulls us back into good behavior. But guilt is not always an indicator of wrongdoing. Sometimes it's a sign that you're doing something new, something real, something that challenges the old narrative. The presence of guilt does not mean you're bad, it may mean you're finally being honest. Schopenhauer would likely agree. He distrusted the moral systems that used guilt as a tool for control. He saw that society often rewards those who conform, not those who awaken. And awakening is messy. It disrupts roles. It threatens hierarchies. It invites judgment. But it also brings clarity, purpose, and peace. This is not a call to become reckless or cruel. It's a call to become conscious, to stop living by inherited scripts and start writing your own. To recognize that real morality doesn't come from external rules, it comes from internal resonance. From knowing yourself so deeply that your actions naturally align with truth, even when they don't look good on the surface. Ask yourself now, what false version of goodness am I still clinging to? What part of me is screaming to be seen, honored, and expressed? What would I do if I stopped trying to be good and started trying to be whole? These are the questions that open the door to freedom. Not the external kind, where you escape rules, but the internal kind, where you escape illusion, where you let go of the performance and return to your essence. Because in the end, the cost of always trying to be good is nothing less than your life. Part 3. The freedom beyond approval. There is a moment in every life when the illusion begins to crack. You look in the mirror and realize you don't recognize the person staring back. You've done everything right, been kind, generous, respectful. You followed the rules, sacrificed for others, smiled when you were hurting. And yet, deep down, you feel empty. Not because you failed to be good, but because you succeeded. You became exactly what they wanted. And in doing so, you forgot who you are. Arthur Schopenhauer would not have been surprised by this moment. He understood that much of human suffering comes not from what we lack, but from the false ideals we chase. The pursuit of goodness, when divorced from authenticity, becomes a kind of slavery, a slavery to appearances, to reputation, to the need to be seen as moral, even when it costs us our inner truth. Compassion is the basis of morality, Schopenhauer said, but only when it is rooted in sincerity, not performance. What we often call virtue is frequently just fear in disguise. We fear being disliked, rejected, judged, so we conform. We tone ourselves down. We bite our tongue. We try to be universally likable, a walking compromise, a polished version of ourselves. But here's the paradox. The more we try to be good for others, the more we betray the parts of us that are real, raw, and necessary. And slowly, we begin to disappear. Have you ever noticed how people who are always trying to be good often seem to carry a quiet sadness? It's not because they lack love in their lives. It's because they've buried their truth beneath layers of obligation. They've become caretakers of everyone else's comfort, but have abandoned the sacred duty of caring for their own soul. They confuse silence with peace, obedience with kindness, and suppression with strength. But suppression is not strength, it is a slow erosion of spirit. There is a hidden violence in always trying to be good, not violence toward others, but toward ourselves. Every time we say yes when we mean no, we commit a small act of self-betrayal. Every time we stay silent when truth wants to rise, we wound our integrity. And every time we choose comfort over honesty, we deepen the divide between who we are and who we pretend to be. In that divide becomes suffering, not visible to the world but deeply felt within. Schopenhauer believed that true liberation begins with disillusionment. That sounds bleak, but it's actually a gift. To be disillusioned means to be free from illusion. It means seeing the world and yourself clearly, without the filters of conditioning or fear. When we let go of the illusion that we must be good to be worthy, we begin to encounter something far more real, our humanity. Imperfect, complex, contradictory, and beautiful. There's a profound shift that happens when you stop seeking approval and start seeking alignment. Approval is external, fleeting, and conditional. Alignment is internal, enduring, and rooted in truth. When you live in alignment, your actions come from a place of clarity, not compliance. You speak not to be accepted, but to be authentic. You give not to be praised, but because your heart moves you. And you stop apologizing for existing in your full form. But let's not pretend this is easy. The moment you stop performing goodness, the world may react. People may become uncomfortable, even angry. You might be called selfish, cold, arrogant. Relationships may change. Some may fall away. And in those moments, the temptation to go back to your old self, to the pleaser, the fixer, the forgiver will be strong. But remember, peace built on self-denial is not peace. It's quiet despair. You must ask yourself a terrifying question. Am I willing to lose the approval of others in order to gain the approval of my own soul? This is the question that separates the awakened from the asleep. Most people never ask it. They live their entire lives in the prison of appearances, wearing the mask so long it fuses to their skin. But if you are brave enough to ask it and answer it honestly, you will begin to feel something extraordinary: freedom. Not the loud, rebellious kind, but the quiet, grounded, unshakable kind. The kind that doesn't need validation to exist. Schopenhauer would remind us that suffering is not the enemy. It is the doorway. The pain you feel when you stop being good for others and start being true to yourself, that pain is the labor of rebirth. It's the shedding of layers that no longer serve you. It's the burning away of false identities. It hurts, yes, but it's the kind of hurt that leads to healing. The kind of fire that purifies, not destroys. There's another question you must confront. What part of me have I exiled in order to be accepted? Maybe it's your anger, the righteous fire that rises when you're mistreated. Maybe it's your ambition, the drive you were told was selfish. Maybe it's your sensuality, your creativity, your voice. Whatever it is, you must go and retrieve it, because you cannot be whole while parts of you are still in exile. And you cannot love yourself while still hating your truth. The irony is, when you stop trying to be good and start being real, you often become more compassionate, not less. Not because you're performing virtue, but because you've touched your own pain. You've seen your own shadow, and that makes you softer, wiser, more grounded. You stop judging others for their mess because you've made peace with your own. In the end, the highest form of goodness is not conformity, it is courage. The courage to be fully yourself in a world that constantly asks you to be something else. The courage to disappoint others rather than abandon yourself. The courage to speak when silence is safer. To walk away when staying is expected. To honor your own life as sacred not in theory, but in practice. So what now? Now you begin the work of unlearning. You peel back the layers of performance and ask, who am I without this mask? You listen to the voice beneath the noise, the one that's been whispering all along. You let it guide you, even when it leads you into discomfort. And you trust that being real, being whole, is worth every consequence. Remember this, you were not born to be good. You were born to be true. And in your truth, you are more than enough. The world does not need more good people. It needs more awake people, more honest people, more whole people. Be one of them.